Adventurous kids, explore with education and learning what a wildlife is in the Everglades. I want to explore the Museum of Discovering Science. What plants do butterflies like? I want to know about Key West Adventurous Kids, learning and fun. Adventurous Kids!
Today I'm going to tell you about Margret and H.A. Curious George is the protagonist of a series of popular children's books by the same name, written by H.A. and Margret Way. The books feature a brown monkey named George, who is brought from his home in Africa by the man with the yellow hat to live with him in a giant city. Curious George was published by Hans and Mifflin in 1941, and for almost 75 years he has been capturing the hearts and minds of readers young and old throughout the world. Books about Curious George, including the 7 original stories by Margret and Hans Way, have sold over 75 million copies. So popular that his original story has never been out of print, George has become one of the most beloved and most recognizable characters from children's literature. Hans Augusto H.A. was born in Hamburg, Germany on September 16, 1898. He grew up there near the world-famous Hannenbeck Zoo and developed a lifelong love for animals and drawing. He served in the German army in World War I and from 1919 to 1923 attended the universities of Munich and Hamburg. In 1924 he moved to Brazil. Margaret Elizabeth Waldstein, who would be known to most of the world as Margret Way, was also born in Hamburg on May 16, 1906. Hans and Margret were German Jews. The two met briefly when Margaret was a young girl before she left Hamburg to study art. They were reunited in 1935 in Rio de Janeiro, where Hans was selling bathtubs as part of a family business and Margaret was escaping the political climate in Germany. Margaret convinced Hans to leave the family business, and soon they were working together on a variety of projects. Hans and Margaret were married in Brazil on August 16, 1935, and they moved to Paris after falling in love with the city during their European honeymoon. It was there that Hans published his first children's book after a French publisher saw his newspaper cartoons of a giraffe and asked him to expand upon them. Raffi and the Nine Monkeys, Silly C, G and the Nine Monkeys in the British and American editions was the result, and it marked the debut of a mischievous monkey named Curious George. After Raffi and the Nine Monkeys was published, the race decided that Curious George deserved a book of his own, so they began work on a manuscript called The Adventures of Fifi that featured the lovable and exceedingly curious little monkey that would eventually become Curious George. Knowing that they must escape before the Nazis took control of Paris, Hans cobbled together 2 bicycles out of spare parts. Early in the morning of June 14, 1940, the race set off on their bicycles. They brought very little with them on their pre-dawn flight, only warm coats, a bit of food, and 5 manuscripts, one of which was Curious George. The Nazis entered Paris just hours later, but the race were already on their way out. They rode their makeshift bicycles for 4 long days until reaching the French-Spanish border, where they sold them for a train fare to Lisbon. From there, they made their way to Brazil and arriving in New York City on October 14, 1940, beginning a whole new life as children's book authors. In November 1940, Margret and Mifflin offered the race a contract for 4 books, including the manuscript for The Adventures of Fifi, eventually titled Curious George. Curious George was an instant success, and the race were commissioned to write more adventures of the mischievous monkey and his friend, the man with the yellow hat. They wrote 7 stories in all, with Hans mainly doing the illustrations and Margret working mostly on the stories, so they both admitted to sharing the work and cooperating fully in every stage of development. Margret and Hans lived for the next 23 years in New York City. On April 8, 1946, Margret and Hans became U.S. citizens. In 1963, they moved from New York to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Margret and Hans had no young children of their own, but their pictures and words have brought joy to millions of young readers around the world. H.A. Ray died in Boston on August 26, 1977 at the age of 78. Margret Ray died on December 21, 1996 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Thank you for watching this Adventurous Kids episode.
What did you learn today?
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!
What was the most interesting fact?
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!